We're actually going to go ahead and get started. So we'll get the lights up in here. And there you is. All right. All right. There'll probably be some people coming, and since we're getting going right away. Tonight we're going to be talking about the difference between passive and assertive and how that affects trauma, how that affects how you view life. And then part of it is to be known within yourself, to be able to self-identify if you're a passive person, if you're an aggressive person, or if you're an assertive person. And it's real important. We'll think, well, it's kind of an easy subject. No, not necessarily. Because self-awareness is everything when it comes to any form of counseling or any subject like this. We have to be aware of ourselves and know what that feels like. So I'll have a little sheet I'll hand out later that talks about assertiveness. And that is our goal. We've been talking about anger resolution and trauma bonding and all kinds of stuff. And how we handle those things is either going to be in a passive way, an aggressive way, or an assertive way. When you assert yourself, it means you know where you're going, you know what your boundaries are, and this is how it's going to run. You're very assertive about it, right? And then the passive person is kind of like, well, let's leave it, we'll see what happens. See what happens usually gets you run over. And when you get run over, then that usually causes you to be aggressive. Because I ain't letting that happen again, right? I tried not to say anything, or I tried whatever, and then we don't want it to happen again, and we get mean. And then we don't like who we are and go back to being passive. But we skip the one in the middle. God's very assertive, and love is assertive. God is love, so that makes sense, right? He's not passive. People have twisted who Jesus is in the sense of like, well, they took him to the cross. You can take the story, and it's truth. They did take him to the cross, but he yielded himself in an assertive way. He knew exactly where he was supposed to go, what the prophecies were that he had to fulfill, and he yielded himself. He wasn't, all passive, and he just didn't know this was going to happen, and then they took him. Poor Jesus. That's not how it is biblically. He knew this is what the Father wants me to do, and even his disciples tried to talk him out of it. And he went, no, this is where we're going. I have to fulfill this. And so he did it in an assertive way. And sometimes when we're assertive, we don't say anything at all because we already spoke. Like if I've already spoken, I told my grandkids or my kids when they were little, if I told them to do something or whatever and I did it in an assertive way, I'm not yelling at them aggressive and I'm not being passive about it. Like, I'll give you a sucker if you do this. No, I'm telling you, this is what needs to be done, right? And so let's go do it. In that, if they come back at me and I'm standing there quiet, I'm being assertive. By the look on my face, by the stance I have, it's like you ain't getting nothing here. You could try to tap into my emotions, but you ain't getting nothing. I already told you what you need to do. So where the passive is open all the time to like, well, I don't know, well, maybe I should give a reward, and maybe this is unfair. It's unfair. You never asked Jimmy to do this or whatever. And you have a passive side to you. You will let people run over you every single time. Yeah. Passivity is really just not a good form of a way to roll. And if we feel like that's what love looks like, that's not what the scripture talks about. And we have to know where does love come from? Well, God is love. That's what the word says. So when we say God the Father, we're talking about love. His banner over us is love. And in that love, he has structure. He's a lot of structure to keep us safe. Not to boss us around, but keep us safe. I don't like going in places that have no structure. It's too loose up in here. It's like, I don't like that whole thing where it's so structured that you can't breathe. Religion will do that. You can tell if a church is real religious when you come into it. It's like, there's a structure here. that will suck the life out of you, and I don't want to submit to that kind of structure. I get in and get out as quick as I can. But I've been in churches, for instance, that are real passive, and they just hand the mic around. Anybody can talk. Anyone can show up at any time and share something, and the service never really goes anywhere, and signs and wonders never really follow because there's no one in charge and there's no structure. Right? So there's something to being assertive and having the right interpretation of that. So if you take, for instance, the handshake. If I'm going to shake your hand and somebody introduces me and I'm a passive person, I'm not talking shy, because shy really just means I'm scared. That was kind of blunt, wasn't it? And we use the word shy as an excuse for being scared. We don't need to develop. She's just shy. She's never going to develop in that because that's how she was born. No, she might not like it, but there's some things you do need to learn how to do, right? And so the passive person usually waits for someone else to shake their hand if they're extremely passive. But also, there's a feeling to the handshake that's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, oh, yeah, and then they slink away, and you're like, what was that? Like, what? Your hand feels kind of like, I don't even know how to interpret that. Like, are you alive? Are you a part? Because there's something about eye contact and a handshake. So when you've got an assertive handshake, or let's go aggressive, let's go way over to the other end of the scale. Usually the body language follows that too, And you're like, somebody introduces you, like, your name's Ryan? Yeah, good. And I'm like squishing his hand in a way that's uncomfortable, but I'm actually taking the position I want him to know I'm in charge. Nobody's going to play around here. So I'm being aggressive, and it's kind of nasty, right? But an assertive handshake, it just feels like I know who I am. I know who I am. Yeah. I was at a place that, we were praying for the sick, and a big, tall guy. I didn't, when I got a read on him, I didn't like it. It's like a person who would want to take over a meeting. So, got to be like 6'5", something like that. And he was ignoring everyone else. This is all posturing. We posture. He ignored everybody else, and people were trying to say hi to him, and his eyes were on me, and he's coming for me. Right? But when he shook my hand, he pulled me in. Right? And was aggressive, not assertive. And I was like, you're a wolf. That's what went through my head. Right? So I got to look out for you or whatever. But I also didn't go, oh, passive. So as he pulled me in, I pulled him closer. You see it, right? Right? There's something to being assertive, but you have to know who you are in that, right? So in a handshake is a good representation of the reflection of how you feel about yourself. I'm going to use more of a term I grew up with. There's also someone in there, the bullcrapper handshake. You leave that handshake just going like, because the person's pegging you in the handshake, looking to take advantage of you. And they're talking and overriding you as a person as they're doing it. And we need to learn to recognize that, whether we're doing it to other people or they've done it to us. Because there's a whole lot that goes on in the handshake, isn't there? How many of you actually enjoy having your hand shook when you come into church? Greeters, how many? See, not everybody. Not everybody. Because there's a whole don't touch me. I don't even know this place yet. And there'll be other people like, I was just so hurt. They never shook my hand because you're more open or whatever. But we have to understand there's a whole feeling that comes with that. And these are the same hands we pray for the sick with. These are the same hands you can slap somebody with, one side or the other. So there's a lot of read that comes out of that. You mix that with a look in the eye. That's a whole deal. So I'm bringing it up because there's been some questions that have come in where people have said, I don't think I can read myself. I don't know when I'm being aggressive. How many of you here, you can recognize the first sign of a change in the tone of your voice when you're starting to get angry? Like it alerts your ears and you're like, whoa, that was a little rough. A lot of people, they can't peg that. We talked about at the beginning of anger resolution, the change in your body stance. Like I'm pretty relaxed right now. Sometimes I'm too relaxed. I'm that person you could be like, there's a million people out there. We're going to put you on a stage. And then you're going to talk and be like, just as relaxed as I am now. I mean, I don't get bothered by that kind of stuff. And sometimes I'm too relaxed. But there's something about being aware of what you're exuding to other people and being aware what they're trying to bring your way. Because it's like your open ports coming back and forth. You give and you're receiving. You need to understand who you are in that. And so I talked about how my husband and I went through a course, 60-hour abuse recovery course, and then part of that was you had to take some time and say, you know, what does your husband look like? You have to say this to your husband. This is what you look like when you're starting to get mad. So it always starts out all giggly. Everyone's like, oh, you know, but it doesn't stay there in the class because they want you to get really real, right? And so we talked about that. I'm like, your eyebrows will come down. Well, the thing is, he has sensitive eyes anyway, so sometimes he's like that just walking around. So I had to learn how to read him. You know, it's a whole different look if he's angry. Some people lean forward. You know, when they start to get mad, they start talking like this and they lean forward. Some people lean back. They put their head back. Like, I'm about done with it. So you have to be able to, it never is the same with each person. Well, my whole thing was the cocking of the hip. If I read something and I didn't like it and I pop over like this, especially if I cock my head to the side, and then sometimes my tongue gets involved where I'm like, run it across my teeth. That's my brain trying to figure out, like, what move are we going to make? I don't know how your tongue gets involved with that, but I'm like, you know, or some people bite their cheek, like, all right? All within seconds, you'll do that kind of stuff. And then if I'm ultimately going to need to defend myself, my hand will start going like this. So if you ever see me do that in a service, I'm seeing something you're not doing because I'm doing something. So if you see me start doing this, but, you know, it's a part that says, ooh, some boundaries are needed up in this house, right? So if we don't know, this is a key point, if you are not aware of yourself and you're not aware that you're passive, you're also not going to be aware of what your boundaries truly are. And if you're aggressive people many times don't have boundaries either. On either one of those ends. The passive is like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. And the aggressive is like, I just do my own thing. The assertive person acknowledges authority and acknowledges the authority they have over their own self. That's important. I got some boundaries around me. I can be really friendly, but there's certain things you just don't do. There's a structure there, and people are aware of that. Not because I'm going around bossing people around. They're like, you got to watch out for her. I can just be in a room, and when you say, I feel like a person with boundaries. I have people tell me that all the time. They're like, well, I didn't know if I should approach her right now. I didn't know, what the boundaries were. I kind of felt like that. Doesn't mean I'm mean. There's structure, though. So if you are in a place where you're, let's say you're wanting to date, and first of all, where do you go to find someone to date? The world provides so many places. And they're the worst places to go. Like, let's go sit at a bar where someone's half drunk. That might give me and then I'll get drunk and we can make a really good decision. Right? I mean, there's something about it that doesn't work out. And so if you're not in high school, seeing the chicks at school all the time or activities of sports or whatever, and then you get older and you're like, I want to date. Oh, where do I go find somebody? First of all. And then if you get in a group of people where there's other single people, are you going to be passive, assertive, or aggressive? I don't know. You got to figure out you. Because some things that will hold us back from finding that right person is coming across way too passive or coming across way too aggressive. I'm not saying hide your personality. I'm saying develop your personality. There's a big difference. A real passive person is afraid to find out who they are. A real aggressive person is a person who's been ticked off and picked at enough that don't tell me. I'll figure it out on the way. Don't tell me what to do. And you can be real hot-tempered and things, moreover, in the extreme. The assertive person just finds out things about themselves and they navigate that. They bring structure around that. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but they're figuring it out as they go. And the more you figure it out, the more you're able to look at somebody and say, no. Now, some people who are an aggressive, they're between assertive and aggressive. If they want you to volunteer for some team at church or whatever, some people will just text the person, hey, Susan, do you want to help out with this? It's more of a passive way of doing it, but you're taking initiative. But I've been in churches after I got saved and I was in this church, there was a lady that everybody knew she was like in charge. Even when they didn't put her in charge, she was in charge. I didn't know this because I was new to the church, whatever, but how she would ask you to do something, she'd wait till you were sitting. She'd wait till right before a service, so you set it up for this thing to be the most aggressive as possible. And then she would come as you're sitting and tower over top of you. I was thinking about you being in the choir, like this, because I think you'd sing good. So I signed you up for the Friday night thing. I hope that was okay. So some people would say that's assertive. No, that's aggressive. You're doing it with a smile on your face. And it confuses the brain in such a way, it's really hard for the person to defend themselves or to have a boundary or whatever because you're smiling the whole time. Yeah, this is what I hope that's so fun, it'll be great. And you're like, oh, okay. Then you get home and you're like, I don't want to be in that choir. How did I get roped into this? Well, now you're not the Christian now because you're going to call and say no. Right? And then people are going to feel bad, so I guess I'll do it this time. How many of you have said yes to stuff too many times, and when you make up your mind to say no, you don't know how to do it? Yeah? That's why it's important. You got to practice no. Yeah. There's something to the practice of no. I like the one comedian when he talks about it. Can't think of his name right now, a Christian comedian, but he said, I tell my kids no, and so many, it's fun making up ways to say no. So he'll be like, no, and then he'll go, no, and he has all these different ways. He's like, no, just to be able to practice to say no. But he does it in a loving way. It's just the answer is no. And if your no is not no, and your yes is not yes, this is where you can get manipulated. People can talk you into just about anything. Then we become victims to that. And if your no is a starter no, that maybe you never said no before, it'll look more like this, like, well, I was thinking no. Not a lot of eye contact. And then some people wait and they're like, I don't know, I'll see, I don't know. Then all of a sudden like, no. Well, then it gets too aggressive because you waited too long. Just let your no be no and your yes be yes. God says that in the Word. Let your no be no and your yes be yes. Amen. God's not a maybe God. Or like, we'll see. And then you drag it out and then the thing never happens. No, he's not that God. He's a yes God or a no God. And so we look to him to show us, how we're going to be. I'm going to have, Ryan, if you want to pass everybody one of these puppies, just a simple little sheet you can keep. We're going to look and see, this isn't all the characteristics, but we can look and see if we fit any of these characteristics, we're going to know if we're a little bit more assertive. And we'll go through these. Because we have to find the one that's in the middle so that we can then go, oh, and that'll show us whether we're being too aggressive or too passive. Now, I will tell you this on an intense end, well, he's showing that. Trauma and abuse will cause you to be extreme passive or extreme aggressive. Yes, you can pop between them. Yeah, you can pop between them and the extreme. So let's say a person, like I've been through sexual abuse and things like that. And we'd done foster care for years. We had 12 kids at one time, and a lot of them were in their teens and had been through extreme abuse. And some of them were just so passive, they'd let everyone tell them what to do, and they really didn't want to do, but they adapted to everybody and everything. And then finally, when they were so passive, they would get so uptight at school or whatever, that they couldn't handle that threat all the time of that passive. When you're extremely passive and people have taken your boundaries away, you're actually walking around, you feel like you're the deer and it's hunting season, right? You're smiling, you're walking down the hall, you're like, I don't want to get shot today. I mean, it's that feeling. Because abuse took your right away to have the boundaries, and you believe that. Trauma took your right away to have the boundaries, and you believe that. So here's what we see is when people are pushed, when they're in that, they're very passive. They all of a sudden will flip over to the aggressive and hurt themselves or hurt someone else. And then everyone's confused. I knew Timmy. She never acted that way. She's a good whatever. And the person who acted out is in shock also. They're just like, I didn't think I'd go to that level. And suicide is usually an option when you're extreme passive and you've been taught that. You're not born passive, by the way. Think about every baby. When they want a bottle, you're going to know about it. If they want to breastfeed, you're going to know about it. Whatever it is, it's like their pants are full, you better get over there and change them right now. If you don't meet their needs repeatedly, they quit crying after a while and they become passive. Because their little belief system is like, nobody's coming anyway. It can be like that in a marriage. You could start out having pretty good boundaries or whatever in a relationship, and then the person wears you down to the point that you don't even know who you are anymore. This happens to both men and women. And then things just become passive. And then when you're in that extreme through abuse, someone asks you a question as simple as, do you want to go to Culver's or do you want to go to Pizza? I don't know, whatever you guys want. I don't know. We're not going to commit to anything at that point, right? And the person who's been taken advantage of and abused and finally is like, I ain't being a victim anymore, and takes the aggressive route, they have the last say, the first say, and don't tick them off because they will lose it on you. And then sometimes just knowing that they'll lose it on you is why everybody leaves them alone, because you're like, don't mess around. They just give off that vibe, like that person's going to lose their stuff. And then I don't want to be a part of that. Does that make sense? So in that, we have to recognize, well, if I'm really passive, there has to be an abuse or something attached to it. Somehow the nurturing wasn't there at all sometimes, or somehow we got mixed messages or abuse took place of some type that our needs did not get met. And then way over on the other side, if you have problems with temper or whatever, sometimes we believe that's the only way anyone's going to listen. If I'm loud, that's when they listen. Where my personality is just loud to begin with. I'm just loud. I've always been like, turn the music up. You know, I like to feel everything. I like it. When I pray, I'm like, I want to feel that prayer. I'm not like, dear Jesus. I'm not that person, right? At the same time, that doesn't mean everybody else. That doesn't mean it has to be aggressive. It's just I'm being assertive in that way, and I feel good about it. And so we look and say, a lot of us are sitting here, and we've gone through trauma of some type. Our needs didn't get met in a certain area. Now, are we mad about our life situation, but we can't say no or yes to make a choice? We can't choose no or yes on something, because that would mean I actually have to make a choice. And when I make a choice, I could get hurt. Does that make sense? I could get hurt. And so then we don't choose. Then we'll start hanging with people or looking for somebody who's not only assertive, but they could lean toward the aggressive that will tell us what to do. Right. And even if they lose their stuff, right, lose their mind and get in trouble or whatever, we'll still gravitate toward them because we're like, well, I can't decide anything. But at least they're deciding wrong or right. They're deciding. Kind of like sobriety, you get with your friends and you're like, I'm not going to do this thing. I just want to see my friends. But there's always an aggressive that will get on you. Not everybody in the group is passive. They'll be the one who's like, we need to do this. Come on, come on. And they'll start out like that. And then it'll be an aggravation and a poking. And then it starts to get aggressive, where you almost feel like now, it's set up in this way. You just let down the whole group. Look at you letting down the whole group. There's a guilting factor to it where you're like, okay, I'll just go there. And then it goes all awry. And then who do you be mad at? You can't figure that out. Well, I'm mad at my friend, but I'm really mad at myself for not having a boundary. I couldn't just say the boundary. It feels like I'm going to get in trouble. It feels like I'm going to get hurt more if I say the boundary. Okay? So let's take a look at some of the characteristics of an assertive person. You are able to say no and not feel guilty. We could sit on that one all night. Could you just help me move this weekend? Could we just do that or whatever? Last minute or and a good friend will do whatever they can to make that happen. But if you set it up wrong and now you're putting all that pressure on them, they do have the right to say no. Yes. Now, you shouldn't push them to the point where they're past assertive because now you ticked them off, or they just never return your call for weeks. That's the passive, I just got to disappear. It's easier to get it over with and just be like, look, dude, I really want to help you out, but it's not going to work out for me. See, no doesn't always have to sound like no, In our mind, though, if we're passive, that's what no sounds like. Like you would have to get to such fervor before you're going to be heard. And if you said no, so it's like, no, it's not going to work for me, that somebody is going to put pressure, that other person going to put pressure, and your no is never your no. No, my no is no. And I'll give you good eye contact, and I'll tell you it's not going to happen. Okay? And we have to learn to come to a point where no is no and yes is yes. So to say no and not feel guilty, how often does the guilty part happen for you? Just raise your hand if it's quite often. You know that you're going to feel guilty almost every time. All right, I said it. Why did I do that? And sometimes we can even feel good in the moment. Like, well, I said no. Good. All right. Yeah. You get in your car, you drive off. You're like, but I said no. I'm a loser. And it'll take you down this whole thing of a horrible friend. And then next time when I need help, they're going to say no to me. So it's like a bargaining thing starts happening rather than just no. No. So to say no and not feel guilty, I'd feel guilty if I was mean to the person in my no. Because you should feel something, right? You should feel like that wasn't right. So, number 2, to change your mind about anything. You're assertive. You feel okay to change your mind about anything. Are you okay in that? Yeah, I said I'm going to be there or whatever. Oh, that's not going to work out. Now I got to call them. And you break out in a sweat. Then you avoid, no, I'll call them later tonight. No, I'll call them not. No. Oh, well, they know I'm not coming. Or whatever it is, they'll figure it out when I'm not there. Well, that's not right. That's not right. That's a passive-aggressive way of doing it. See, now we're taking the two ends and we're tying them together. I'm so passive about this, but I'm just not going to show and leave them hang, which is an aggressive move. Now you're being passive-aggressive, but you're not being assertive. Make sense? You're okay with to take your time to form a response to a comment or a question. You're okay with that. Yeah? Now, sometimes an aggressive person will take your right away to do that. if you let them. You know, like I call them machine gunners. We have a whole another thing. I still have to do that class where there's different ways that you can communicate poorly and keep a household dysfunctional. And one of them is to machine gun people. You just start on them and you're like, you know, it's like almost like a howitzer when it gets really going. It's got a big thrust to it. And they're just like, you know, getting hit and they're going to get a word in, but they can't, but they want an answer. Right? How many, you know, moms will do this sometimes. They're asking a question, but they're not really giving the person a chance to answer because they're so mad. They'll be, how many times do I have to tell you to clean this room? No, shut up. I'm talking to you right now. You need to understand that blah, blah, blah. And then they'll ask another question and you're like, and then you just learn to just shut up and just let her machine gun me. Just right? Well, if you keep those same behaviors, you won't speak up when you need to. You know, sometimes you got to just let the person go on or you stop them in the middle and just say, Mom, can I give you my side to what's going on? See, that's assertive. Right? But it doesn't have to be passive and it doesn't have to be aggressive. And you definitely don't want to pull a passive-aggressive thing where you mix the two together because that drives everybody crazy. You're okay to ask for assistance with instructions or directions. You know how I fix that if I feel uncomfortable in something and I don't know what I'm doing? I make that announcement right up front. I don't care if we're at a conference or whatever, and we get to a subject I haven't studied or something like that, I'll just be like, I don't know what I'm doing in this area, so you guys can boss me around, just tell me what to do, and I'll learn as I go, and everyone's like, oh, okay. Well, see, then I set it up to learn differently. They're not expecting me to take charge, and I'm also not just laying there all passive. I'm like, I'm going to learn as I go, and I'm going to do this thing. By the end of class, I'm going to do this thing. But I don't set it up like, oh, I know, and inside I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So you're okay to ask for assistance or with instructions or directions. I've been with people that absolutely lose it if they got to ask for directions. Or I've been with people, they're putting something together, and I'm saying, hey, can you put that together for me or whatever? And they take the instructions and they lay it there, and it's not working, and it's not working. And you're like, well, all you have to do is pick up the page. It's like, I got it. You don't have, I just put that down. I know what I'm doing. And you're like, whoa, you're getting a little aggressive over a piece of paper. Just a piece of paper. We're okay. I know it's, usually in English, Spanish, and French, but we're just reading a little section here to see, why these extra screws are left over. We're okay, So, but if an assertive person just knows, well, I'll just ask for instruction, whatever, because in the end, your plan is to finish the project. You've asserted yourself to be able to, however we can get this done, we're going to get it done. You're comfortable to ask for what you want. Sometimes I'm not a coffee drinker. I know it's a shock for everybody, but I just never have. I love the smell of it, but I am with people who order coffee, like at Starbucks or something. And wow, there's a breakdown that people have memorized, and and make sure it has this, and and they crank it off really fast like that. They're asking for what they want. I'd have to simplify it. Sometimes I'd be like, that's too much work. Just give me a coffee, some cream. I mean, that's how my brain works. But there are people that you feel comfortable in asking for exactly with a shot of this in it and has to have that in it or whatever. But when it goes to ask for some other need, can't do it. Can't do it. But we know how to rattle off the whole order at Starbucks. Just boom, boom, boom. Caribou, there you go. All right. We're okay in that area? You're able to ask for assistance? Okay. To ask for what you want. I'm just letting it sit so you can think, is there something you feel skipped over on in your life because you haven't asked for what you want? This affects prayer. I mean, when you think about it, we're supposed to come boldly before the throne of grace in our hour of need and ask what we want so that he will give it to us. We're supposed to knock till the door gets open. We're supposed to seek, and then we will find. We're supposed to ask, and it will be given to us. But if we're not comfortable, we're in a passive way, or we just know, like, if I have to start asking for this, it's just going to tick me off that I even have to say. I mean, people should, if God's a God of love, he should already know what I need. Well, you're kind of in an aggressive zone. That is not how I want to approach the Lord of glory. And so he said, come boldly before the throne of grace. That's assertiveness. And then sometimes we'll be like, well, I want this or whatever, but now I'm going to get passive aggressive about it. I'm going to not deal with things I should be dealing with, and then I'm going to poke my face into areas I shouldn't be messing with. I'm going to mix those two together, and then I'm going to say, well, God loves me. He should have done something. He's very passive-aggressive about it because we're mad because it isn't working the way that we want. We're okay to experience and express our feelings. Oh, we could sit on this one tonight, yeah. Yeah. Could we say sometimes it depends on to who? There are people that can be in group. Man, they express their feelings. They feel safe, and they just like, and there are people that go to Thanksgiving. Whoever is in charge of this, I'm just out. I'll just show up. I'd like it to do this, and I think it'd be great if we included that, but I ain't saying nothing. Because of past things where somebody ran them over or whatever it is. So there's something about asking for what we want and experiencing and expressing our feelings about that. Just being able to just be so casual about saying, you know what, I do that, but that makes me really uncomfortable. Could be, you know, you can do that if you want, but I'm not going to make that choice. That's assertive. Not being passive and just sitting there frozen, but I'm also not being aggressive. Stop asking me to do that. I'm just like, oh, I just say right out. Here's how it is. And I find that people will say, especially, you know, I'm not perfect, so I'm not in this zone all the time. I try to be. But a lot of people will tell me, you make me feel comfortable, right, because you're truthful. Well, who am I the most truthful about? Who do I have to be the most truthful about? Because if I'm schmoozing you about me, you already are not going to trust that. I have to be truthful about me, or you're going to feel it because we all emanate whether we're comfortable or not. We all emanate that where it's just coming off of us. Our posture changes, we get stiff, or, we're breathing differently, or we sway, or there's all those different things that we do that kind of tell you how the person feels. But here's the thing, people who are really aggressive don't pick up on those cues. The person who lives in the assertive realm is looking for them to feel safe, which makes them also look, how can I make you feel safe? If I'm being aggressive, I don't got time for your safety. I'm trying to get my point across. I'm tired of being run over, right? And if I'm being passive, I'll tell you after a while, passivity does this. It's like, no, you go ahead. You can be the winner. You can whatever. But it also says, I wish somebody would notice me. Very quietly, I just wish someone would notice me. And it eats you alive because you're not sharing your feelings. Yeah? I'll give you an example of this in a husband-wife fight or a boyfriend-girlfriend fight or whatever. Can happen between you and your parents or however. It's where you want to express your feelings, or you want to say what you want, or you're uncomfortable doing something or whatever, but you don't actually say that part. We're addressing something other than the thing we really need to express. Let's say the husband says, are you okay? I'm fine. I'm fine. Washing dishes like you're, vacuuming or whatever. You sure you're okay? Is there anything we need to talk about or whatnot? I said I was fine. Then those kind of things start happening. Look, I was just checking out. I'm going to go out to the shed. That's what you do when you're like, she ain't fine. So there's something to that because she's trying to work through that. Is there something we need to process? I will stop everything for you is really what needs to happen in that moment. And we can talk about it. What is it that you need? A passive person and an aggressive person both will have it on the inside. You should already know what I need. Is that mature thinking? Do you know what I need right now? Well, I thought you guys cared about me. It's obvious what I need. It can end up like that, and it's a setup. It's a setup to end up feeling like, you set it up for yourself to get hurt. See, he didn't even know what my need was. And then he goes out to the shed. He loves his car more than me. No, he feels how lethal you are. I'm just being honest. I live this stuff. I've watched this stuff. I help people through it all the time, so I'm just real about it. Guys many times will come home from work, they're trying to disconnect from the thing that irritated them all day at work. That's the thing. They're like, I just need to go to a zone where there's nothing. But when you come home, you're still the dad, aren't you? You're still the guy who fixed the lawnmower. You're still the husband. And so what you're really needing is some space, but a lot of times nothing is said. You just disappear. That's a passive way of handling, like, well, if no one comes for me, I'm going to watch my favorite show. And then everyone knows if they bother you, you could get aggressive. So nobody touches the channel changer or tries to intervene. And there's certain times you just figure out you don't go down there and ask anything. The game is on, or whatever it is. But really, he's saying, I went through so much stuff today, I have to have some space to do this. Well, then if TV and all that takes the place of the wife, that's not right. Or takes the place of the kids, that's not right. But then if they're over on this side saying, well, you never get that space. You haven't been here all day. You don't know the responsibilities or whatever, But he also needs space. I ran a preschool and daycare for years in my home and then at the church and stuff like that. And that was one of the terms, you'd see a kid just starting to shake or get frustrated. And they don't have the verbiage when they're two. They're not going to be like, hey, Mary, this kid's really starting to irritate me. They don't talk like that. It's just like they look and they're like, give me the toy, and then here's another one. If you ever see a little kid start to do, and they're shaking like this, and then all of a sudden they'll bite somebody. They're trying to get a message across. That's like a whole paragraph right there when they bit. And people are like, oh, my kid's a biter. Something's wrong with him. No, they're communicating. They feel dominated somehow, and they're going to be aggressive to keep their space. So if you see that and you get down to their level and you're like, hey, Jimmy, do you need some space right now? And you provide a place for space, right? You need some space? Here, come on over here. You guys can play blocks over here. And you separate the child away. Not that they're bad or whatever. You would be shocked at how much they liked it. We used to, in one place, we had a cube with a hole in it. They loved to just sit in there and look at books. They can see all the other kids, but they got space. And then they're fine. They come back out and play. It's over, and they move on. But if you don't catch them in that, aggression happens, and then you're like pulling apart two cats, and it doesn't work well. It's the same thing with adults. So I need to, Bern will say, is something going on? I'm like, there's about 10 things going on right now. And I'll say it like that because I'm not going to puke on him with the information. Like, here's the 10 things. And he's like standing there, just got home. I don't know what just happened here, right? But, you've been holding it all day. We're like, in our house, we're both gone all the time. So when we get back, we're like, what was your name again? It's more like that. Then we have to do like a reentry and, and do that. So, but, I can remember when the kids were little and he would come home or whatever. Any needs that I had, forefront, man. But if I felt he wasn't going to listen to me, I already assumed the rejection. So you don't have to hurt me. I'm already hurt. I just got here. Yeah, I know. You were gone all day with everything I've been going through. You can set it up like that. rather than, him just saying, what you got? It's like, I got about 10 things, so I know it's really not a good time to talk about it. Maybe we can cover one or something. It goes very business for us because we had it the other way when we were first married. And we don't want to go back to that because there wasn't a lot of business. Like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean, what do I mean? I mean, it can go like that so fast. Rather than just, and then sometimes women and men both can do this, but women, we're emotional and our emotions will come out in our sentence, and we don't even catch that we're like coming across like we're attacking a person. And just instead of saying, the kids were out of order today and we got a decision we have to make. We're shaking inside and we're like, those kids, I mean, if you were around more, that would help, but, Billy just did it. So, no, we just put a dig in. That's aggressive and passive at the same time. Like, I'm not really going to face you on this, but I'll throw a little dig in. Like, if you were around, which means it's your fault that these two were fighting. Right? And you've moved on and you're machine gunning him, telling him all the problems, and he's still stuck on the fact, you just insulted me. You just blamed me. So you're saying this is my fault? You're saying I'm a bad dad? He may say that, he may not. Inside, though, it's like, you know what? I don't even like coming home. So we set it up a certain way, don't we? And at the same time, sometimes, guys, if you come home and she's standing there and she's shaking because she's been with 3 toddlers or something all day, which is intense, because that's why you don't want to do it. I'm just saying, there's a reason. You're like, well, it's not because I'm a guy. I don't think so. I just don't think you want to be in that. That's intense, right? And so there's a nurturing part that we have that helps us navigate that, and so we don't lose our mind. But at the same time, there's a way to say, is there anything I can help you with up front? Because later I'd like to take a half hour. I'd like to watch my show or whatever it is. But you're making the needs first, and then you make a plan around that. And if we can't fit enough in an evening after work or whatever to make a plan on that, something's wrong. Something's wrong with our life. We have to take a look and say, there's got to be a better way to navigate this. But you can see how passive and aggressive can break up a marriage over kids fighting and somebody feeling lost, and you get resentful. And when you get resentful, do you share what you need? You share what you're ticked about. But you don't share what you need. Sometimes, and I learned this, I learned that what I needed was a hug. I didn't even know what I needed. Right? Something happened, somebody accused something in counseling, and this happened, and the kids are freaking out, and this one's got an earache, and whatever, and you can have that, and he'll be like, can I help you with anything? What do you need? And you're like, I don't know. You're mad and you want something relieved, but you can't figure out what to do. And I will tell you, a hug, not a speech, not any of that stuff. It's more like, well, come here. It's going to be okay. He would do that. It was like a drug. I'd just be like, oh. But if we stayed just talking about it, I would keep ramping up. Works that way with kids. You gotta stop everything and be like, okay, that's the problems. But come here, I just want to reassure you that I love you and that it's going to be okay. So a lot of times we'll answer in an aggressive way because someone's coming across with the problem aggressive. You're like, every time, we'll use terms like every single time and I never, always, when we're mad. The passive person can't even figure how often. They're just like, I don't know. And the aggressive person's like, every single time I turn around. And if you're starting to express your feelings that way, what it does is it begs the other person to come up to your level of feeling, but they don't feel what you're feeling. And when they don't come up to your level, does that make you mad? Yeah. Because if you're feeling what I'm feeling, you should equal that. No. You come in my office for counseling and you vent, I'm not going to vent with you. That's right. You should tell him, or whatever. I'm not going to do. Wouldn't that be weird if I did that? Like I just get in there and I start pacing and I'm like, we got to get this to stop in your household, and I'm feeling what you're feeling and I'm at that level. No, I'm actually there to be the steady right? And if I can't be the steady, I need to dismiss myself and say, we might have to meet again a different time, or let me just, I'm going to go to use the bathroom. I'll be back in a minute. Whatever it is, because I'm the steady. And women look for their man to be the steady. But what happens is we'll also put men in a spot where they always have to be the steady, and they can never have feelings, because it's not our job to help them at that time. They're the man. You're supposed to lead. And you're only allowed 2 emotions. Remember we learned that in anger resolution? Men are allowed 2 emotions, happy, and pissed off. When they fall off a bike and skin their knee as a kid, it's like, buck it up, get back on. You can be mad about it, but otherwise you got to be happy. Just be happy with the blood draining down your leg. Just be happy and get on that bike, right? And then a little girl does something and ambulance shows up. She's got a little speck of something and you're like, are you okay, honey? But there's a training in this world that says that too, that it makes a man weak if he has needs. Well, we're created in the image of God. We all have emotions, contrary to popular belief. All these wedding shows, all these world, just junk on TV, I don't watch them. I can't stomach it. Where the woman's the princess and she comes out and it's all staged around her and she's just so awesome. And is he going to marry her? It's this kind of thing. And then it's based on how much money he has, if he's handsome, and if he can provide her every single need. And then if she doesn't like it, she's out. That's sick. We don't want relationships like that. That's weird. So men have feelings too. And you can express them, except for if you're only allowed 2 emotions, whoever taught you to express them. Guys don't sit around a guy group either and be like, I've just been feeling really lonely. So confused. And I just, and, right? It's not allowed. And then on the other hand, do they have to express their feelings? Do they have to? No, but if they don't do something, no feelings ever get processed. And that's something that does drive women batty. They're like, process your emotions. You're walking around here aggressive. Or you're shutting us all out, passive. And now you're getting passive aggressive. You're trying to send a message that we all have to figure out the code to because you're not willing to talk about how you feel. That's the guy's weakness. And then chicks, we're in a whole different spectrum, aren't we? Yeah. And just the networks, if you saw the SPECT scan of a woman's brain when she's sleeping, I'm talking sleeping, the whole network is moving. It's like up here, just there's electrical impulses, and she's sleeping. And then they SPECT scan the man, he's able to shut off, and it'll do a little thing up front. That's the difference between us. It's not about brains, it's about emotion. It's about connectivity. And men need to be able to express and know how to deal with their emotions more, and women need to know how to tune that down. Because if you let this all get jiggy, you're dangerous. You will spend too much money, too much time, change your hair 15 different ways in a month. I mean, if you let that get out of control, it's like, and it takes that stable man to not be aggressive towards you, but to come and just be like, hey, babe, I like you the way you are. It's okay. But a lot of times what happens is the speech. How many of you women have heard the speech, like, you spend too much and da-da-da? Well, that's critical. Now we're criticizing, and then she's going to defend that with all this wiring. So you better run. Because you just lit her up. And it's like she can remember every detail of when the last time you let your socks lay in the wrong spot. This is just like the time I remember at that wedding 7 years ago. Okay, what wedding? You don't even remember the wedding. But that's how it is. Because it gets lit. And then it's too emotional. And for men, they can feel that emotion, but they also don't have the permission to process it. We need to process emotion. And we need to know when we're crossing over to being aggressive and we're way too passive. When you're way too passive, what? You're not saying what you want. You're not asking for directions or instruction. That means I ain't going to read a book on marriage. I'm like, that's dumb. See, because we're in avoidant mode. We're changing our mind about different things. That's not allowed. I feel guilty even speaking up right now. So maybe we're just not compatible. And then you feel like you're going to blow apart over something someone else looking in. You're like, that was a way easier solve. But I've been in it, and when you're in it, it makes so much sense. It's like, we're on, baby. This fight is on, and I'm going to win, right? And the other person's like, I'm going to win. Well, we changed the rules of how just learning, getting new information, actually reading instructions, that would be the Bible, and other classes on how we handle each other. And it's not, when we come into something, I'm not trying to win, and he's not trying to win. We're both, I want to make him win, and he wants to make me win. And if you start to think like that, it just throws a curveball in your communication. Because you're like, no, I'm not going to say that. And then he's like, you know what? So we can talk about this, right? It changes how, because I'm trying to help you win. And you're trying to help me win. It's a win-win situation where we come away, we've learned something about the other person, right? Because we're both assertive enough to say what we really feel. Okay? Now, I got to stop there to clarify something. When women are hormonal, they end up 3 nights in a row with the kids, vomiting or whatever. They're expressing their feeling. Here's where they really feel. This is what they really feel, but it comes out like this. It's end of the world stuff. Like, we are all dying. We're not going to make it through this one. It's over. Because that's what those hormones and stuff make them feel. So it's a whole different job for guys to be able to comfort. And sometimes we're not allowing ourselves to be comforted at that time. We like to be mad because there's a whole surge of energy in our body that's like, let's let this sucker roll. We're going to die. And then, it could be a week later. You know enough not to remind them of that conversation from the week before because you don't want to relive it. And they don't want to talk about it because they're like, that was weird. I totally wigged out. And I'm kind of embarrassed, right? So it's good to know if you suffer PMS and things like that, it's a real deal. It's a real deal. It actually causes a lack of clarity in the brain. But you still have all the wiring and all the files come out. Usually during that time, like, I'm putting all the files on the desk and we're going to deal with it all because it's all connected. And you're like, I was just asking if we're going out on Friday night. No, you weren't. You just want to go out because you want to get rid of, or whatever. And we just go down the line. And then later we kind of feel dumb about it. And then we don't express if we're sorry. How many of you were raised with the word sorry? And I'm not talking sorry. That's different. Well, we said we were sorry. No, you said sorry. That doesn't mean sorry. And sorry can be said without saying sorry. It's like, wow, babe, we should have done that differently. I feel bad that happened. See, that's an ownership. Like, let's press the redo button and start this thing over again. And then you literally need to move on. But if we don't have those skills, what happens? We begin to fear each other because we know, it's about to cycle again. We're going to do that thing. And then we're just starting to take trips away from each other and those types of things because it starts a pattern of like, I'm scared of you. Right? And the guys will get with the guys because I've heard those conversations. Or the guys are like, I don't know. There's a lot of that. I don't know. Does your wife do the same thing? Yeah, I don't know. Because nobody can even put it into words usually, right? Especially if you're not used to expressing your own emotions, you won't be able to clarify what's happening with hers. Ever think of it from that way? And then chicks, man, we get busy. It's like, I'm calling her. Yeah, he does the same thing. Are you serious? And then we're expressing all this, and then it's hard to take that back, isn't it? It's hard to be like, that was me all jiggy last week, and I actually don't really feel that way this week. Now, what do I tell my friend? Right? And then sometimes a friend will be in a mode and they'll rally. Remember what we talked about last week? If I was you, I was thinking about that. You should tell him, right? But you're not in that frame now. You're like, no, actually, I understand him now. And she's like, oh, I was going to help you problem solve. So just clarifying, that's how it works. Now, assertiveness means we can ask for what we want. We can express and experience feelings. I'm going to clarify something on that one again. When you tell somebody they shouldn't feel that way, that's called emotional rape. Rape means unwanted touch. You just came and touched their brain in a way that says, you're crazy. Because here's the problem with it. The brain receives that of like, I shouldn't have done something, but I already did it. I already feel that way. I already feel hurt. I feel lost. I feel shunned, whatever. And now you're trying to tell me to take it all back. And your brain is made in such a way that it's not, we can't take that back. We have to process it. Process it. Means we're going to have to talk. And we know where that goes. It'll have that kind of feeling to it. And you got to watch out for that because a person can experience, I've actually had to say this to Vern when we first got married. These are my feelings, and my feelings are real to me. You may not feel that way, but I already have felt that way. So now I'm trying to process, what do I do with those feelings? I'm not trying to decide whether or not I should feel that way. It's too late, I already do. See that? So if you're trying to help somebody, never say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. It's like there's something wrong with you and your perspective. Woo! If you're the person that's said to, aren't you just a happy camper after that? No, you're going to defend your feelings because now you feel victimized. So, number 7, to feel positive about yourself under any conditions. Woo! That's all of us, right? We're all just saying, that's me. But assertiveness helps you to be able to do that. Or when you are in that state of mind, that's when you're the most assertive. You're not going around bossing everyone. That's aggressive. This is just, I'm just being me. I'm in it. Number 8, to make mistakes without feeling embarrassed or guilty. It's the first thing you do when you fall on the ice. Look around to see who saw you. Trip on the stairs, trip on your pant leg, something like that. The first thing you hit, it doesn't matter if you broke your arm or whatever, whoosh, you come up like, who saw that? Who saw that? Well, that's a sign of woundedness. That's like you weren't supposed to do that command, and that hurts. So we can make mistakes, and so spilt milk used to be a big, horrendous thing. Back in the day, if you spilled your milk at the table, embarrassing, especially if we had family members over, because they're proper. And then, it's almost impossible to clean it up. Impossible. That's how it was treated. What are you doing? And then loud questions about the person. All the attention is grown there. And then after a while, you just don't drink a lot at the table because you're afraid you're going to spill your milk. We should be able to make mistakes without feeling guilty or embarrassed. A mistake is something you didn't plan happening. And so I would say out loud, in order to bring healing to my brain, oh, that didn't go as planned. You say that right out loud. Rather than, how many times, I always do this kind of stuff. It's like, whoa, that didn't go as planned. All right, we'll clean it up. And then you give a solution right away and your brain goes, thank you. And it can just move on. It's that simple. We had a girl that lived with us that was heavily abused. We had to, when we were doing foster care, we had to take a drill and we had wood window frames and just drill the window shut so she couldn't get it open. Not because she wanted to get out, but she just knew someone was going to come in through the window. and she had been molested and different things like that. And we had taken her out to Pizza Hut just to have fun. And we had a whole lot of kids at Pizza Hut, so we apologized ahead of time when we'd enter a place. Like, sorry, we're here. We have 12 kids. It's probably not going to look the same by the time we leave. Just upfront about it. We'll try to help and clean up or whatever. And she went to go get her drink all by herself, right? I said, no, you can get that by yourself. Here's your cup or whatever. And she was sitting in a booth, so when she went to scoop forward, she put her hand on the table, and someone else's drink was sitting here, and the table went whoop down, and the drink went all over the floor. She was so frozen in trauma. Like this was the end of the world. That's horrible, isn't it? I wish I'd had more skill like I have now to be able to help her. I mean, I did some things right, but I could have done better when I think about it. Because she was looking for aggressiveness to happen. You made a mistake, your punishment is here. And you're looking around and you're froze because somebody's coming for you, but nobody's coming for you. But you're froze. Anyone here ever experienced that? Yeah. Some people will have that with just a question. Maybe they're scared of finances, and you bring the checkbook and you're like, what's going on with this? Just the same feeling of her spilling everything all over. You're like, and you don't have an answer. Your brain freaks out. It freezes. And you don't have an answer if you've been traumatized in areas like that. Because you're like, punishment's coming. Did I do something wrong? I don't remember what I bought. And it starts going into this freak out zone. And it doesn't even pay talking at that time. Well, we can talk about this, in an hour. Let you calm down a little bit. I was just wondering because I thought we were going to spend that on that, and now I'm not sure where this money is. And sometimes it's a simple answer of, oh, well, I didn't write this in yet. I made a deposit, and blah, blah, blah. It can be that simple, but you'll just be like, and froze, and you can't move. See? Somebody aggressive took out your ability to be assertive and have good eye contact and share how you feel and what you see. It's automatic, just frozen. To own your own opinions and convictions. America has a lot of opinions. I don't know that they have a big amount of convictions that are healthy. It's a lot of opinions. And part of being assertive is knowing that other people have opinions, and we have to listen to everybody involved. But you still have a conviction that says, I'll just be blunt. I mean, if it offends you, I'm sorry up front, because I'm telling you how I feel and what my conviction is. And so, same way I have to respect other people, my opinion and conviction counts too. But when it comes to abortion, I own my conviction on that. Right? And I know whom I believe in. I know what the Word of God says. I know what love would do or whatever, and that's what's built into the inside of me. And just because someone gets aggressive doesn't mean I have to take that back. Does it? I'm not being aggressive sharing that right now, but if I shared that on the streets in Minneapolis, I might get shot over a statement about my conviction. So what's happening is the people who should say something saying nothing at all. We're all quiet. We're becoming very passive. Like, well, but when we get together, it's like, oh, this is horrible. What's happening? Nobody's doing anything about it, though. A person with conviction is going to say something, right? Do you have to get aggressive? No. That's where even Christians have gone wrong. Sometimes it's like, what do you do? That is not what Jesus would do. You're acting like the world trying to solve a Christian problem. So there's something with that. We need to have our own opinions and convictions. But if you're extremely passive, having had an aggressive person take your opinions and your convictions away, really how they do that is you don't have a right. That's slavery of the mind. I'm the one who gets to have the opinion in this relationship. Yours does not count. That's tough stuff, isn't it? And so that if you believe in that, you'll get more and more passive, waiting for the punishments constantly and just moving yourself around so that the aggressive person doesn't get aggressive. And can you always meet that need? No. Well, as soon as you get to the bar where you think you're safe, they'll just move the bar. And you just lose more and more of who you are during that time. And then a lot of times people will get out of those kind of relationships or those situations and they're counseling with me and we're literally starting from a point of like, who are you? I don't know. I've been in this way too long. I actually don't know what my opinion is. I don't even know if I like vanilla ice cream or chocolate. Extremely abusive situations, it's whatever that other person wants. Because you ain't getting in trouble. You're not going to start something. So I just go without my needs being met. Ooh. Another one for assertive is to protest unfair treatment or criticism. You have the right to do that. Did you know that's what the word Protestant means? You're a protester. Right? But unfair treatment or criticism. There's a way to do that. A protest can just be in the middle of some kind of conversation where someone's getting aggressive or whatever. It's like, okay, so we need to take it down a notch. This is not right. I'll talk to you about this, but we don't need to mishandle each other at this point. I'm protesting what's going on. What happens is we're so passive sometimes, a person's like, and then you just, only option comes to your mind is what? Aggressive. Like if he keeps on, I'm going to pop him right in the face. I mean, that's what'll come to you. And you're like, I can't do that. I'll probably get arrested. And you're going through this whole debate thing. And you only got seconds to decide this. So we do nothing at all, but we leave really angry. Or we say something we shouldn't have said to that other person. Where assertiveness says, actually, I can speak up if something is not going right. I have the right to do that. It's how you do it. What I just gave you an example of was an assertive way to do that. Like, well, we're not, sometimes I'll tell people, back up the train a little bit. It's okay. I'm not against you. I have the right to my feelings and my emotions and my standpoint. And I give you every right to have yours. But we don't need to go to this point. And then they're usually lost because they don't know how to communicate. Because they've only learned the aggressive way to communicate. Right? You know where you can get good practice dealing with assertiveness? Work at Culver's or Wendy's or something where you only got seconds, right? The person's like, this burger, and you have to have an answer, And sometimes people will do the suck up where they're like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. If you do that all the time, it'll wreck your conscience because that is not how you feel about it. There's a professional side that you do. But there is a way of saying, we're not allowed to do that here. We can't just replace 3 meals in a row. I'm glad that you're, eating half of them and bringing them back after you're disturbed with the hamburger somehow. But you still want more from us. You're not saying all that, but there's something inside going, there's got to be a different way to do that. And just saying right up front, this is what we're allowed to do, or this is our policy here. So you're assertive. And your good fighting days, though, like 8th grade, because that's usually when fights are really the thing. They're all the rave. Fight. If someone said, I don't like this hamburger, and I don't like this store, I need to speak to a manager, or something like that. The first thing that goes through most people is fight. And then the whole store, right, you're standing up there waiting to order, everyone just goes, woof. And like, what you going to do with that? Yeah. And then who works there the most? Teenagers? And there's not a lot of grace for them. Just their age. Older people should give them some grace. They're trying to get what you need, right? Them young punks up in here. Well, now you're being an old fart. I'm just being honest. I always tell my husband, please, if you ever see me turning into an old fart, let me know. Because you can age with grace. Or you can just get mean and just be an old fart. There's a kindness. There's a kindness. I've watched it at Culver's. Ari used to work there, and where older people, elderly people even would come up and just be like, "You're doing a good job, and I just want you to know that." And it just lights up the youth. They're like, "Oh, that's awesome," because they're like trying to navigate this, and we're scary. So it's a make or break. You're like, get in there and earn some money to buy a car. I hope you make it. You don't know how to be assertive, so nobody's taught you, but get in there and just see. And then next thing you know, they're fired because they told their manager off, or they're just not showing up, and that's passive aggressive, and whatever it is, but they're trying to navigate to get away from that. They have to have the skills to get into it, and they have to be ready to do that. It's not just getting a paycheck and moving on. Does that make sense? I hope so. I hope you don't become an old fart either. I have to have terms that are identifiable. So, to own your opinions and convictions, to protest unfair treatment or criticism, to be recognized for your significant achievements and contributions. If you're an assertive person, you're not aggressively looking to be recognized. And you're not over here passively like, I hope someone notices me. Part of you having boundaries, if you're doing well at a job and they don't recognize that after 3 years or shorter, but you're too scared really to go in and be assertive and say, you know what, so-and-so's gotten a raise and stuff, and I'm just wondering how it works because I feel like I'm doing what I need to do. And is there something else you need of me? Because I really want to support this company, and that's an assertive way of talking. Rather than, my boss is a jerk. And you can be passive about it and be the victim, or you can get over here and be aggressive about it, or just wait until you get out of here. But I'm going to take as many people with me as I can, and when we go out afterwards, I tell all my friends who work here, this is what's really going on. It's almost like you want to overthrow the company, and it's like, okay, now you're in ditches. Pull it together and say what you need to say. Yeah. That's that assertive thing. How many of you know the areas you can be assertive in? Yeah? There's certain areas you're like, no, I could speak up with that. Like I know Bonnie would be assertive when it comes to the food downstairs. Somebody brought something in with mold, and they're like, I brought this so everyone can eat it. I'm saying, she's been doing this for years, right? She's not going to come over there and slap you, but she's also not going to stand by and go, mold, what do we do? She'll come up very kind and good, eye contact, and say, we can't have mold on our food, and I noticed there's some here, right? That's assertiveness. So when things come at us and start to break us down, many times we stay mad at all the other people. If all the other people are wrong, let's just go with that theory. Like they are all wrong. They're all messed up. Then we really need to learn how to be assertive. And if some of them are not messed up and might actually have a point, we still need to learn how to be assertive because in that skill, we'll see their point. But if we're thinking aggressive or we're thinking passive, they could have a really good point. We won't see that because this is war on. You're trying to hurt me. That's the passive. And no, you ain't telling me what to do, is the aggressive. Interesting, right? Very interesting. So when I brought it up to begin with, some of you might have thought, oh, it's kind of a bland subject. No, if we can't figure this out, we can talk about any other subject. And if you don't put yourself in the right zone of how you're hearing it or how you're going to walk it out, it's not going to work. You'll just know information of like, oh, this over here is codependency, and this is, whatever the subject is. Well, you have to know how you're going to face codependency in an assertive way. I'm going to take a class on it. I'm going to develop what I believe about it, and then I'm going to hold to my convictions. And I'm going to think through what I would say to somebody if they're trying to push their codependent ways on me. I don't have to get mean, nor do I have to sit quiet. I can be assertive. And a truly good assertiveness is when we know when to be assertive. Like, I pick my battles. I'm not like, I'm assertive. What were you saying to her? And I'm assertive. I'm not going around in everybody's stuff. I see some things happen around, but I know in my conviction that the Lord laid on my heart like that needs to be addressed. As a pastor, if you go to a church where you have a passive pastor, anything can happen, right? And whatever the government says, we'll do. How many of you know I'm not a passive pastor? Neither is my husband. But then there's also those that are aggressive to try to motivate the people, and they're just, shaming things and stuff like that. Get out. Or help the guy or the woman learn some skills. Talk to them about it. Be assertive and say, this is what you're coming across like. I just want to help you out. And if they tell you off, that's their aggressive side. That's wrong. But you have to understand that to even know that that's wrong. If they disappear and leave the church and I should have never said that to them, that's their passive side that says, I don't want to deal with reality. You bring something up to me, and even if I feel you're wrong, I'm going to consider what you're talking about, because I'm also looking at it like, wonder what made them feel that way. Did I come across wrong? Is there something in their storyline that would have... But I'm also not going to let your emotions run me over and start taking over the church because I'm running around putting out all kinds of fires of everyone's stuff, right? You have to be assertive. Jesus is assertive. Otherwise, it wouldn't say, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Thy rod is to beat down the wolves away, and thy staff is what leads you, and he knows the way. He's the light. He's sure. When you're sure on something, you can be assertive about it. If you're always, I don't know, that's where you go to classes to learn so you can get to know and settle it as truth to you, and then you start making boundaries around that. And then you practice assertive stuff. It takes a while. If you're used to being aggressive, way I was raised, the aggressive part is just like you have to stand and kind of blink like a frog in a hailstorm because you're like, I can't say half of this, right? When you're first coming out of it, I actually can't do that. I could get arrested or whatever. But it's the first thing that comes to you. After you practice the fact that you have value and you do have some say-so, and it's okay to express your emotions, and you do count, it comes across way different. Because now you see the value in the other person, and you see the value in you, and your whole thing is, I want this to somehow be a win-win. Amen? So I just want you to share this with you. 1 Samuel 17 is verse 31. The heading there says, David kills Goliath. And I had to ask myself, is David aggressive? Is he being aggressive in times of war? You could go to war and be aggressive and get yourself killed, or you can go to war and be assertive. There is a difference, right? So here, if you go down that story, I'm just telling you where it's found, 1 Samuel 17, starting at verse 31. It says that, he took out a bear, he took out a lion, so he just was used to doing that to protect the sheep, and just a young guy. And he's doing that, and then here comes Goliath just mocking the whole city, the whole of David's people. And at the same time, David, when he goes out onto the field to meet him, he does not come out there aggressive. Now, it would look like it because he's got his weapons to kill Goliath, but he's coming out there assertive. So read the story, and you'll see the difference where Goliath came out aggressive. Look at you, you dog. And just mocking and just trying like he's picking a fight. And here, David's this boy. And he's this huge, but he's talking smack. Right? Because he wants this thing to go aggressive as soon as possible. And aggressive people will always bait you out to get you aggressive so you enter into where they want to take you. And when you don't do it, it makes them mad. Makes them mad. You're like, I'm not taking the bait on that. You can just go fish somewhere else. I'm just, love you, but no. Right? And so David, it doesn't say where David just talks smack back. Just like, got all cocky and in his face and everyone's yelling, fight, fight. It's really when he answered him and he said, you come at me like a dog and you have a stick. And David's like, I come at you in the name of the Lord, which means Jehovah Sabaoth, the God of war in the appointed time. That's assertive. He knew who he was. He knew who was backing him. He knew his weaponry. And now here I am. I'm being assertive. He wasn't aggressive. So who's going to be the one who can think straight? Right? Because when you get aggressive, you get dumb. Because adrenaline makes you just focus on what's in front of you. And here you got this boy, and the anointing of God's on him. And Goliath is just peeved. He is mad, so he's in this thing of like, I really got to let everybody know the armies are watching. And because if David wins, they all got to be slaves, right? If David loses, they're all belong slaves to them. And so there's a lot at stake here. Am I a dog? It says in verse 43 that you come to me with a shepherd's staff. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. He brought up all his gods and then cursed our God. You can't get any finer in your baiting material. It's like I'm going to go deep and just touch the button and see if you flare. Because in war or in combat and in those things, the more level-headed you are, the more assertive you will be. It's not how crazy you get. Right? And so the Philistine also said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. I'm baiting you out, little punk. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. He's naming all his weaponry. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. See, he even took it off of himself. He was like, it's not a problem for me, you talk smack. But you're talking about God. And I'm standing here on his behalf. So just saying. Just saying, right? So there's something to it. And then he slays him with a stone. And then verse 51 says, so he ran and stood over the Philistine, grasped his sword and drew it out of its sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. Now the whole Philistine army is like, oh snap. Because they saw not an aggressive person, and the size didn't even make sense. They saw an assertive person under the power of God. And they were like, we are in trouble now. Amen? Let's stand. Father, we pray right now that the clarity of being assertive, seeing it the way that you see it, knowing who we are and building into us that our yes is yes and our no is no. And it's done in love and kindness. No matter who gets aggressive around us, we can stay assertive just like David did. And we still accomplish it, and it's done in such anointing and power. Lord, show us how to do that within our households. Show us in the mighty name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Thank you for coming out tonight. We are on again next week, Wednesday, and then Saturday. Here we always have a free meal at 5:45, and 6:45 is the service. And we're just happy when you come out and be a part of it. All right.